Okay, here we go. We're going live in 3, 2, 1.
Grab your mason jars, strap on that apron. It's time for Canning with the Diva, making her mark across the globe, teaching you how to safely preserve delicious recipes. Please welcome your host, Diane Devereaux, the Canning Diva.
Hey everyone, it's Diane Devereaux, the Canning Diva. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Canning with the Diva. This time we are going to focus on growing, selecting, and preparing corn for home canning. And I know we use corn in a variety of different recipes for home canning. Sometimes it's water bath, sometimes it's pressure canned. But I wanted to focus specifically on the varieties that are available and suitable, or I should say most suitable for home canning. Any corn will do, but I do know when it comes to certain home canning recipes, you're going to get a better outcome, I guess is the best way to put, depending on the variety. And then other times we don't have an option, right? If we don't grow it ourselves, we're relying on local farmers or the local grocer or a national grocery chain to purchase our corn. So I get it. I get it. But for those of you that are, gardening and you want to have a specific variety on hand for your home canning needs, I'm going to touch on that today. I'm also going to touch on a couple different home canning recipes that incorporate corn and that are a little bit more specific when it comes to the variety. Again, there's times I have made my corn chowder recipe using frozen corn kernels that the corn came from goodness knows where. It says the United States, but I don't know where in the United States. I hope it's the United States when I see it on the package. So I don't want anyone to be detoured from this episode that if you don't grow it, you can't can it. By all means, you have to use what is available to you. But for those of you who've reached out to me specifically wanting to know, as you're getting your garden started or your planning started, many of us have started our seeds. Some of you in southern regions where it's already warm have, your garden well underway. But those of you that have reached out to me wanting to know how to select I call it the perfect corn variety, but again, there's nothing perfect, right? It's just options available to you. I'm going to discuss that today. And then, yes, we're going to talk about cream-styled corn, how to get that into a jar and preserve it so you have it on your pantry shelf. And then, like I said, we're going to talk about home canning corn chowder, which is one of my favorites. It's such a hearty, delicious recipe. An awesome go-to when you want some comfort food. Super yummy. So we'll dive into that as well. And then we'll talk a little bit about the culinary side of things from a mathematical standpoint. There's some rules of thumb and some math out there to help make it easier for you. If you, for instance, are part of a CSA or like me, I love to go to my local farm. And when things are in season and I buy the produce by the half bushel or the bushel, having this math on hand will make it easier if you do the same thing. Or if you grow it yourself, you're going to know how many ears of corn you need to yield X amount of cups of kernels. So stay tuned for that as well. All right, let's get started. Okay, so when I actually shared the recipe and instructions for canning cream-style corn, that's when I saw a lot of emails and social media posts wanting to know, what type of corn variety is best for home canning. Some canners that were reaching out to me were quite disappointed with the variety that they chose the previous year or the variety that they bought at the store. And they just felt that when they tried to make cream style corn, the variety they have didn't produce enough milk or pulp to get that creaminess for the cream style corn recipe. So I did some digging. I spent some time talking with some of my gardeners and seed distributors to get a feel for, what is going to be the best, especially spanning my reach, right? Many of you tune in from all over the world. And so I wanted to give some popular sweet corn varieties that you could get your hands on no matter where you reside. So what I have found after talking to a couple of my gardening and seed experts is the main list is about 5. Now there's more, so don't panic if the one of the 5 isn't something you typically grow, or if you've already started your seeds, don't panic. These are just some of the common home canning varieties that individuals will gravitate towards. Now, there are also different types within this family that I'm going to list off, because there's 5 different that we'll talk about today. So don't think that it has to be exact. I know for one in particular, the Silver Queen, you're going to see Princess, you'll see King, Silver King. There's a huge family of this particular variety, and they're all sweet corns. Some have different attributes, and the Silver Queen technically is an all white sweet corn, and that is a very late season variety. It has very tender kernels, and many will gravitate towards that for home canning because it is, sweet enough to give you what you want in a canning recipe, but also milky enough. So when you're removing the kernels off of the cob, you're getting that gorgeous pulp and that white creaminess from the corn kernels as they kind of get cut and squeezed. And so many of my gardeners say that they gravitate to the Silver Queen. Another very popular one, and many of you may have heard this, is Peaches and Cream. Now, that is a variety that is both white and yellow kernels. They're very sweet, have a creamy texture, but they're not so sweet that when you pressure can even just corn kernels, or again, sweet corn, cream style corn, that it gives a burnt flavor. It doesn't do that. So all these varieties we're talking about, these 5, they're sweet, but they're not so overly sweet that processing them for a great length of time at a high temperature is going to give you an off-putting flavor. It will not. So that's a blessing. And Peaches or Cream, is a variety that's been around for a while. And from what I've been told, it's quite easy to grow. So keep that in mind, especially for those of you doing small gardens or container gardens. I was given very positive feedback about Peaches and Cream. Another that is also quite common is candy corn. Now that starts with 2 Ks, K for candy, K for corn, and it's all yellow with a high sugar content and very juicy kernels. And again, I was told that one's also easy to grow and can withstand high growing temperatures. So if you are in a region with a lot of high heat and full sun, candy corn is an option that is easy to grow, very sweet, large kernels, very juicy, and I've heard very, very positive things about it. Now, the other 2 are also popular. They are both bicolor. They'll have white and yellow kernels. And there's a slight difference between the 2. So let's discuss those. One is Delectable and the other is Ambrosia. Now, Delectable has it's known for very milky juice kernels. Okay. So if you are really focusing on putting up chowders or soups, or you want to make cream style corn, the Delectable version or variety, I should say, is ideal because of its excessive milkiness. So you're going to get that creamy, like milky texture in whatever it is you use these kernels, especially when you're taking them right off the cob. Now, the Ambrosia, that also is a yellow and white corn, okay? It is sweet and tender and is also known for having a very creamy texture. So I guess it just comes down to what you can get your hands on, what it is you want to grow within your garden, but also use these 5. I'll go through them again. When you're talking to your local farmers, your farm stands, get a feel for what it is they grow. So that way, when you're home canning, these popular sweet corn varieties are going to produce delicious home canning results. So let's go through them again. These are the 5. We have peaches and cream. We have delectable, silver queen, ambrosia, and candy corn, which starts with a K. K for candy, K for corn. Kind of fun. Now, after taking some time to carefully select which corn variety is right for you and for your home canning endeavors, the next step is determining, okay, so how many ears am I going to need for a batch of, for instance, the cream style corn or just straight up corn kernels? Now, I did some research, not only myself for when I purchase, because I don't grow the corn. I have a limited amount of space now that I've downsized. I used to have a 40-foot by 40-foot garden. I loved that garden. And I kept it quite full with a variety of just about everything. I even had fruit trees in there. So now that I've downsized and I've been living in a new home with a smaller yard, I just do container gardens. And so I rely on my local farm for some of the, more labor intensive and more space required produce. So corn is one because I'm using the container gardens. I don't want to grow the corn in those and give up valuable space for other things. And then my Roma tomatoes, I'll grow them, but I still produce, I can so many that I do have to still rely on my local farm because I just don't have the space, because I'll can upwards of 8 to 9 bushels of tomatoes every season because I use them so much, right? They're a good foundational item for a lot of recipes that we cook on the stovetop. So with regards to what you need as far as ears of corn, it has been said that roughly 35 pounds, okay, which is about a bushel, all right, that it's going to yield between 6 to 11 quarts of whole kernel style canned good, right? 12 to 20 pints of cream style corn. Now, I found this on Penn State Extension Office, so I had to do a little bit more math to kind of break this down. So here's what I found for us. If we're going to do a full 7-quart canner load of just whole kernel corn, okay, we need, and this is in the husk, this is ears of corn, an average of about 31.5 pounds, okay? By the time you remove those kernels, you're going to then yield 7 quarts worth. And obviously 7 quarts means 14 pints. You can do that math. Now, if you take it a step further and you want cream style corn, it's about 20 pounds is needed in order to do 9 pints of cream style corn, because it takes about an average of 2.5 pounds of ears of corn to make 1 pint of the whole kernel. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, again, this is just a guide because it's so difficult depending on the variety of corn, and we went through 5 of them. Each style will have a different girth to the ear, length as well. And so you have to always err on the side of getting just a little bit more. So I tell individuals, if the rule of thumb is, say, 31.5 pounds, well, go ahead and get 33 or 35 pounds, because that's an extra, 4 or 5 ears, depending on what the variety of corn is. I'd rather you have more than not enough. So if you wind up with more, then you can use it in, say, for instance, a batch of, my favorite salsa. How about that one? We'll do the black bean and corn salsa. You're just going to need a few cups of corn kernels for that recipe. So keep that in mind. If you have an overage, that's going to be a lot better. You can save that extra in the refrigerator and use it the next day or within the next day or two for a subsequent canning recipe. Just keep in mind, you're going to want an average of 31.5 pounds of, those corn cobs. Everything's got to be in the husk because that weight is included. If it's been shucked already, obviously it's going to be a little bit less of the poundage. So just, there's no absolute math. Like even for when I took my culinary classes and my culinary math class, I still have my textbook. I keep that textbook handy. I use it often because we do best guesstimates based on, output. But then we also in culinary school, we focused on, prepared food and, factoring in waste. We don't use the entire ear of corn, right? We're going to throw away the husk. We're going to throw away the corn silk. Everything has a weight. The cob itself doesn't get utilized in the recipe. That has a weight. So just keep those things in mind when you're shopping around. And if you're in the garden and you're pulling those ears of corn off of the stalks, just keep in mind that, you're going to need a good bushel's worth in order to yield 7 quarts of kernels. Okay. All right. So if you have, so let's say you're driving. I know a lot of you love listening to me while you're driving and you can't jot all this down. Don't worry about it. In the show links, I have given you the access to my website. So you can have all those individual links. So you can always go back to the math at canningdiva.com. So don't worry if you can't take notes. You can always just click on those links and have easy access to that math and information. Okay, so another thing I want you to have access to is a way to remove the corn kernels from the cobs easily. There's all kinds of, cool things you see online. Like I love the video of the guy who used his drill, and just made mincemeat out of the out of the corn kernels. I mean, they're out of the corn cobs, excuse me. The kernels are coming off, pretty fast. I think he did the same thing with, it was apples, right? He basically used the drill to spin the food fast and then some type of blade or apparatus to do the cutting or peeling, if you will. So I have not tried that. But I do have some cool videos and tips and links on my website at canningdiva.com so that you can get through, 30 ears of corn pretty quickly, because that's about, what it takes. Your average ear of corn is, roughly a pound, right? And so that 31, 32 pounds of, ears of corn, that's a lot of work. Now, some individuals like to use a sharp knife and a bundt cake pan. That works. I have a corn husker. It's a really cool corn kernel removing tool that's on my website at canningdiva.com. So there's a lot of cool ways to do it. I guess what it really comes down to is how much time you have and how much you plan on preserving. So if 7 quarts of corn kernels isn't going to get you through the winter and you're going to, do 5, 6, 10 times that amount, obviously you need to find a method that works for you to save the, I don't know about you, but the older I get, my wrists just aren't as strong as they used to be. And I do quite a bit of typing because I'm constantly working on recipes. I'm writing books. I'm writing articles. I do a lot of typing, and then I'm in the kitchen using my hands. So by the end of the day, my wrists and fingers are quite sore. So I try to gravitate towards things that are easy grip or don't require a lot of wrist movement to just make my life easier. So if you're the same, check that out at my website, canningdiva.com, and find the tool that's right for you. Now, before we dive into some of the recipes I mentioned, we're going to talk about cream style corn and we're going to talk about corn chowder. I want to share with you some of the other options you have in the event you go overboard. And let's say you have way too many corn kernels on hand and you need to freeze some or refrigerate some for later use. Let me give you a couple ideas on how to use them. Now, I gave you the black bean and corn salsa. Another that is really delicious and easy, and trust me, you'll be making, once your family eats this one, you're going to be making it several times throughout the year. Chicken tortilla soup. That one is a very popular recipe. It is absolutely delicious. My son, just the other day when he was fighting a cold, I brought him over several jars of it, and he was just tickled pink because it's his favorite. Chicken soup is a mainstay, but this chicken tortilla soup really has some authentic flavor to it, and it did the trick. So keep that in mind for future if you have some extra corn kernels. Tex-Mex corn relish is another delicious condiment that keeping that on your pantry shelf, it helps you change things up, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of hamburger eating, hot dogs. If you like condiments, the Tex-Mex corn relish is absolutely delicious. My sister enjoys it on her eggs actually in the morning. So there's a lot of unique ways you can utilize it. So keep that in mind if you wind up with a plethora or an abundance of corn kernels and you need some ideas. There's plenty more on my website and in my cookbooks, especially Beginner's Guide to Canning for those of you that are new, the Complete Guide to Canning for those of you that are just enjoying the next step of learning, which is pressure canning. And then, of course, my next cookbook coming out, Meals in a Jar. It's called The Canning Diva Presents Meals in a Jar. It will launch August 6th. I have taken cuisines from around the world, broken them up into different chapters, including, Mexican, we have Asian, Middle Eastern, American and European, Mediterranean, you name it, it's in there. And I also have a chapter dedicated to vegetarian recipes as well as food or ingredient substitution. So that one is going to be a game changer. I'm super excited. I partnered with Harvest House Publishers, and again, it will be out August 6th. So there's going to be a lot of delicious recipes that you can utilize your garden harvest, including your corn.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
At Canning University, we're unlocking the flavors of food preservation year-round. Dive into a world of safe and confident canning with our range of digital classes. From principles of pressure canning to the art of pickling, there's a course for every taste. Enjoy diverse learning mediums, including engaging videos, interactive PDFs, exclusive podcasts, and course certification to prove your skills. Join us on this delicious journey. Enroll now at Canning.University.
Okay, so let's get into a recipe. Let's talk about cream-style corn. And I don't know about you, but it truly is one of my favorites. Now, growing up, we ate it a little bit sweeter than what I care for now as an adult. So I know, the addition of sugar for some of you watching, your sugar intake, you kind of have steered clear of eating cream style corn because you have always known it to be quite sweet. Well, just know that with home canning, that is one of the beautiful things that we have control of. And what that means is we get to control what goes into that jar. So if you have to watch your sugar, your salt intake, just know that sugar and salt in this recipe are completely optional. So if you just want to rely on the corn and some water and the processing using a pressure canner, you can go back to eating cream style corn without worry because it's going to now be suitable for your diet. Now, cream style corn has been a very popular side dish in many American households, and it's commonly used in recipes. So things like casseroles, soups, for those of you that love making cornbread, cream style corn is very versatile. It doesn't just have to be a side dish all by itself. It can be used and incorporated into many things. It adds a creaminess to our dishes that we create. And it can be a convenient option for adding flavor and texture to an everyday recipe. So keep that in mind as well. Now, for those of you that are taking notes, I'm going to have you jot down, some of these quick ingredients. It's very easy, very simple. It's going to make roughly 6 quarts or 12 pints. And you will need roughly 28 pounds, which is 36 ears of corn. Again, it's not perfect because it depends on which corn variety. So use your weight. And if you're not so concerned of trying to keep at that 28 pounds or you don't have a scale at home, no worries. Start with at least 36 ears of corn. And you're going to want 5 cups of water, 2 teaspoons of sugar, which again is optional, and 1 teaspoon of salt, again, which is optional. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to husk those ears of corn and remove the silk. And I want you to wash the ears in fresh running water. I think I said W, too many W's. Wash the ears of corn in fresh running water. Cut the base off of each ear of corn to create a flat bottom. Okay. Using a large mixing bowl, stand one ear upright in the center of the bowl, and with one hand, I want you to hold it. The other hand, I want you to remove the kernels off the cob using a downward motion with a serrated knife. Work your way around the entire ear of corn until all the kernels are removed. Now, if you, like I mentioned earlier, you want to use a corn cutter tool or something that's maybe a little more ergonomic to give yourself some grace, your wrists, give them a break. You may do that. Just make sure you're using a bowl or some type of container that's going to catch everything, including the milk and pulp from the ear of corn. Now, after removing the corn kernels, I want you to use a knife and I want you to scrape that pulp and milk from the cob. I want you to capture all of it into the bowl. And I want you to repeat this step for every ear of corn. And I want you to notice after you've got every ear completed, you're going to see a lot of milky, beautiful liquid in that bowl. And that's exactly what we want. Now, after removing everything, we're going to take that bowl of corn and its pulp and its milk, and we're going to transfer it into a stock pot. Make sure you get every last little bit. And then I want you to add the water, the sugar, and the salt. And I want you to bring that to a boil over medium-high heat, stirring it often because we don't want anything to scorch. And after roughly, about 5 minutes, I would like you to get your hand stick immersion blender. If you don't have one, then use a potato masher. And I want you to just do a quick mash or a quick puree, but I only want you to mash about a quarter of the kernels. So you're literally pulsing that immersion blender maybe 5-6 times because you don't want to puree everything. You just want to get a quarter of the overall contents to just give it a quick little puree or mash. Okay. You do not want to mash the entire stock pot full. There has to be some whole kernels in this recipe. The majority of it are whole kernels, so keep that in mind. This is just a very quick zap, okay, or a mash. Then I want you to return it to a quick boil. Once you see it bubbling, I want you to remove it from the heat. Using a funnel, I want you to ladle the cream-style corn into jars and make sure you leave a 1-inch headspace. Wipe your jar rims with a washcloth dipped in vinegar, and then add the lids and rings and hand tighten. And now you're going to process these jars in a pressure canner at 10 psi or according to your elevation and your canner type. So if you're using a digital canner, depending on which model, you're either going to select the PSI appropriate for you or you're going to let the digital canner do its job because it already has everything pre-programmed to keep it at 240 degrees. Now, for processing times, it's going to be 55 minutes for pints or 85 minutes for quarts. All right. Now, one tip I'd like to give you. Sometimes I will use a quart jar of cream-style corn as a base for making my corn chowder. Now, if I'm in a rush or, God forbid, we've ate all the corn chowder, I don't have any more left in a jar on my pantry shelf, I will actually use a quart jar to make the corn chowder. Hey, we're all about, putting all of this energy and time into saving our produce, our food, so that we have quick, easy meals down the road. Well, I will tell you, it is a very easy recipe. Once you already have the cream style corn in your pantry, boom, it becomes the most amazing, quick corn chowder ever. So yes, I will do that. For those of you like me who love having the already made corn chowder on your pantry shelf, we're going to talk a little bit about corn chowder when we come back from this break. All right, corn chowder. This is a very traditional American soup that likely originated in New England, particularly among early settlers who relied heavily on locally available ingredients. This dish was likely inspired by Native American culinary traditions. Corn was a staple for many Native American tribes in the region. And early versions of corn chowder typically included ingredients like corn, potatoes, onions. They even included bacon or salt pork, and then, of course, milk or cream. Now, over time, we've seen a variety of variations for this recipe. I mean, sometimes people will add carrots and celery, fresh herbs. We've even seen seafood added to corn chowder, such as clams. So we really in America have a lot of fun with this recipe, and it's been preserved in a variety of different ways as well. I personally keep it simple. I do like to add bacon, and I do also add potatoes because it helps with that thickening and that creaminess. And then for home canning, I will add cook type clear gel because I do want it to be hearty, thick, full, and I want it to be, something that I can also use if I wanted to create a casserole from it. And so more often than not, I'm going to heat a jar and just eat it with like soda crackers or some freshly baked bread. But I have also used it as a foundation because, see, as a home canner, I don't use cream of soups that are commercial. They're so high in sodium. There's so many ingredients I can't pronounce. I would much rather use a corn chowder that's, in my pantry as a foundation for a casserole or some type of dish versus something store-bought. So I created this recipe for that reason. But then, uh, I'm not opposed to eating it right. Eating it right out of the jar. I heat this up. I'll add some heavy cream to it, and boom, especially in the winter when it's cold, or for many of you in the Midwest like me, it's still cold and gray in February, right? So there's a lot of times that this is just that comforting pick me up. And there's times where I won't even add the heavy cream to it. I'll just keep it as is. I'll throw some, grated cheddar cheese on top, and boom, delicious meal in a jar. So for those of you that want to create it like me, you are welcome to jot these ingredients down and add this to your canning list of recipes to create this year. We'll start with the ingredients. I'll kind of go through them with some explanations, and then I'll reiterate them again so you can jot them down and make sure you got them correctly. All right, so for starters, we're going to want 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 medium onion. We're going to chop that so we yield 1 cup. 6 celery stalks. We're going to dice those, and we want to yield 1 cup diced. 6 garlic cloves minced so that we have 1 tablespoon of garlic cloves minced. 6 thick cut bacon strips. Now, I know I've gotten this before when I've placed in a ingredient list thick cut bacon. I get a lot of emails and questions saying all I have is regular bacon. Is that okay? Absolutely, it's okay. Just know that you're going to want to increase it, probably double it if it's real thinly sliced. I sometimes will pull off, if I don't have thick cut, I'll pull off 2 strips at a time and cut them so that way I'm getting, the extra, and I'm counting 6 of those, which is technically 12, right? It's all going to heat up and cook the same, but I just want to make sure you have enough bacon in the recipe. So 6 thick cut bacon strips or 12 thinly cut strips. And what you want to do is use your kitchen scissors and cut those into 1/2-inch pieces. You'll need 6 medium potatoes. You're going to peel and cube those so that you yield 6 cups cubed. You'll need 5 cups of corn kernels. And yes, you may use fresh or frozen. 2 red bell peppers finely chopped, so you yield 2 cups. You'll need 16 cups of chicken broth divided. a third cup of cook-type clear gel, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of salt, which is always optional, and a half a teaspoon of black pepper. Okay, so let me run through those again, especially those of you taking notes. You want 2 tablespoons of butter, 1 cup of chopped onions, 1 cup of celery, 1 tablespoon of minced garlic, 6 thick cut bacon strips. You want to cut that into 1/2-inch pieces. You'll need 6 cups of cubed peeled potatoes, 5 cups of fresh or frozen corn kernels, 2 cups of finely chopped red bell pepper, 16 cups of chicken broth, a third cup of cook type clear gel, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of black pepper. All right, let's get into the recipe. So in a large stock pot, I want you to melt the butter over medium-high heat. Once it's melted, I want you to add the onions, the celery, and the garlic. I want you to toss that well, and I want you to cook it for about 8 minutes or until the onions become translucent. Next, I want you to add the cut bacon, and I want you to mix it good, and I want you to continue to cook. You want to cook it all the way through, not so that it's crispy or burnt, but so that it's cooked all the way through, which will take about 10 minutes. Go ahead and make sure you're stirring that regularly. You don't want anything to burn. Next, I want you to add the cubed potatoes, the corn kernels, the bell pepper, and I want you to add 15 cups of the broth, meaning reserve 1 cup, set that aside, but I want you to add 15 cups of broth, the paprika, the salt, and pepper. Now, stir it really well and get those ingredients I cannot talk today. I'm so sorry, you guys. I want you to stir everything really well so that you get all of the ingredients mixed and blended. We want all those flavors blended, and I want you to bring it to a boil. Now, once it's at a boil, I want you to set a timer for 5 minutes. While it's boiling, I want you to take a small bowl, and I would like you to whisk together the clear gel with that remaining 1 cup of broth, and go ahead and whisk it nice and good. You want everything to be very well diluted. It's kind of like a little slurry you're creating. And we're doing that so it evenly disperses throughout the entire stock pot. So once everything's well distributed, I want you to empty that into the stock pot, let it boil for 1 additional minute, remove it from the heat. Using a funnel, I want you to ladle the corn chowder into hot jars, filling to a 1-inch headspace. Now, if you would rather evenly disperse all of the solids, go ahead and use a slotted spoon and fill everything to just about 3/4 full of each jar. That should be very well evenly distributed amongst the jars, and then ladle back over top of all of that the broth. That's your call. I've used a funnel with great success. It's a very thick, hearty soup. I haven't had too many issues of an off-putting ratio of liquids to solids. Just know it is an option for you. All right. Once all the jars are filled, everything is at that 1-inch headspace. I want you to wipe the jar rims with a washcloth dipped in vinegar, then add your lids and rings and hand tighten. Now, this soup is going to process the full time and temperature. So we're going to do quarts for 90 minutes. We're going to do pints for 75 minutes. 10 psi or higher, depending on your elevation. And yes, all of the recipes that are designed for home canning can be used in a digital canner with great ease. So the beauty with the digital canners is it's less of us, tending to the stovetop. It's done all for us using sensors and thermometers and thermostats. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. However, they're smaller, right? So they don't hold as much. So you may have to do a couple batches worth. Feel free to cut this recipe in half. So if you are using a digital canner, okay, and 7 quarts is going to be too much because I think even the Presto only holds 5 quarts. Feel free to cut this recipe in half if you're using a digital canner, or go ahead and create the full recipe and just do 2 different batches using your digital canner. I hope that you have so much fun creating this delicious, hearty soup because you can truly enjoy it any time of the year. And it's a great way to use up frozen corn. So for those of you that have only removed the corn kernels, froze the corn, kept it in your deep freezer, and now you're like, okay, I have several Ziploc bags full. I got to get these, out of here before they go bad. Or you're trying to make room because berry season is upon you and you're like, okay, I got to get rid of this corn. This is an excellent recipe to utilize that frozen corn to make that space in your freezer. So keep that in mind when you're taking inventory and we're getting ready for a new canning season and growing season, right? Keep that in mind and don't hesitate to use any of your frozen foods in your home canning recipes. All right, as always, I am so happy to have you tune in. It's been such a pleasure being with you. I look forward to being together next week. But until then, happy canning.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Canning with the Diva. For tips, recipes, and techniques, please visit us online at canningdiva.com.